we start. Okay, so best thing is to start with recall if one or two are late, coming late. Okay, so we were having this following situation. We have a norm-linear space which we denote by n norm. Then we look at its dual, that is the dual of the norm-linear space, and because the dual is also a norm-linear space, we can talk about its dual. So therefore n double star is the dual of n star. And this we call the second dual of n. This is called the second dual of Okay, again as I did last time before concluding, let me recall, if we take an element in n star, then what all we have is listed below now. This means the following: 1. F maps n star to the field F. If it's real numbers, it's a real norm-linear space, it maps it to the real numbers. If it's a complex norm-linear space, it maps to the complex numbers. 2. F is linear, so it preserves, F maps n to F. And F is linear, it preserves superpositions. 3. F is bounded, and the norm of F is defined to be the supremum of mod Fx over norm x, where x belongs to n and x not theta. I will just write theta for the 0 vector, theta star for the 0 vector, then theta double star for the 0 vector in n double star. Okay. And from this it follows that the modulus of Fx will be less than or equal to norm F star times norm x for every x in n. These are the things that we have. Whenever I say that F belongs to n star, I mean all these things are available for us. It's a bounded, it's a functional, it's a linear functional, it's a bounded linear functional, it's bounded defined this way, and with that bound this is satisfied. Okay. Now analogously, you replace n by n star, then you get double n. So if you have F belonging to n double star, what we have are the corresponding facts with a star shifted. First, now F will be mapping from n star to F. It will be now attaching a number with every element of n star. Okay. And 2, F will be linear. It will preserve superposition of elements of n star. 3, F will be bounded, and the norm of F double star, the double star norm of F will be equal to the supremum now mod F of F divided by norm F star. F now belongs to n star and F not equal to theta star, not the 0 element. that is the one corresponding to this. Then the fourth one is mod f of f will be less than or equal to norm f double star and times norm of f star. These are all the things that we have when I say that script f belongs to n double star. Okay. So it's essentially the same thing. Now the norm linear space is different. For n double star, it is the star of the previous norm linear space, which is the n star norm linear space. Okay. Now these things, now from now on I will keep using left and right. Now what we are going to do is look at these things in a more general way. Okay. What does, suppose I take an f in n star. Now I am going to look at it. The first thing that I know is it is going to associate with each element of n a number. Okay, that is what meant by it's a functional. So what it does is, it is like a small pinhole and I take the n and I take an element x and it passes through this and some number comes out. Okay, this is my linear function. You take another element y, again it passes through this, it will produce another number. So for, if I just now focus every element onto f and then they all scatter out as different numbers. That is what the linear functional is doing. So it is actually filtering out certain numbers connected with each vector. With each vector it filters out a number like the student SR number or maybe your PAN card number or some such number is what it finally filters out. Now what we are going to do is going to reverse the role. See, this is R. This is the filled element. So for everything it is going to give a number. Now what we will do is we will take a fixed element in so think of this f, one f, here I have fixed an f, take an f. It is like, here is a doctor, he is simply measuring the blood pressure of each patient. Okay. The g, if I take another linear functional, he may be measuring the blood sugar of all these patients. So that norm linear space n is like patients and this f, g and h, all these linear functionals are like doctors. Each fellow is trying to measure something with the patient. Now what we are going to do is take a patient and let him go through all the doctors. Okay, so what I am going to do is take a fixed patient and then I am going to take all these doctors. Take an f, ask him to examine him, he gives out a number, take him to examine him, he gives out a number and so on and so forth. So this patient extracts a number out of every doctor, which means we have, starting from a fixed x, we have a way of assigning numbers to every functional. Okay, so therefore, hence, starting from an x in n, we can assign a number fx to every f in n star. Okay. Which means we have got a functional on n star. With each n star element we have a number. So what is a functional? It extracts a number on every element of that set. Now we have a way of extracting a number out of every element of this set, and therefore we have got a functional on n double star. So we can define a functional which I will call, because functionals on n star are always with script letters, okay, f, and that functional depends on x. We started with that patient, so every patient gives rise to a functional fx which assigns to every n star a number, okay, defined as the number assigned to any fellow f here is the measurement that fellow does to this patient, f of x. This is for every f in n star. Okay. So this is what that functional, the thing that describes this is this functional fx. Okay. With every doctor you have a number, and that gives rise a functional on the doctors, but this is the functional on the patients. Okay. Is that clear? So therefore we have now a functional on, the moment I have a functional on n star, I would like to know whether it's a bounded linear functional, etc., etc. Okay. So the questions arise are, does fx belong to n double star? That's the question. The moment I have a functional on some nonlinear space, immediately I ask whether it's a linear functional, whether it's a bounded linear functional, and so on and so forth. So if it has to be there, I want to check this and this. Once these are satisfied, this automatic. This is how norm is defined, and this is how it happens. So to check whether it belongs to n double star, I want to make sure that it is a linear functional on n star, and this is a bounded functional on n star. So we have to check whether fx is linear and fx is bounded. These are the two things that we have to check to make sure that fx is in n double star. So now it is a routine verification. Okay, to check, now let us check one. So if I want to check that fx is linear here, that means I must say that fx of f plus g is fx of f plus fx of g, and the other one. So let us look at f and g. Suppose they belong to n star, implies fx of f plus g, by our definition of fx, fx of anything is that thing acting on x. So that will be equal to f plus g x. Okay. But now f is a linear functional, g is a linear functional on n. How is the addition of linear functionals defined? Normal function addition, it is fx plus gx, because f is a linear function on n. But now fx by definition is fx of f, and gx is fx of g. So fx of f plus g is fx of f plus fx of g. See, the verifying that this is linear is translated into the language that what is meant by addition in the linear functionals. Then what else to check for linearity? I will erase all this. I hope you can remember this. Okay. Then fx of alpha f, okay, is where alpha is a scalar. By definition, it is alpha f acting on x. Fx of anything is that thing acting on x. But now again, for linear functions, the scalar multiple of a function evaluated at x is the same as evaluated and then scalar multiplied by x. Okay. If you want to evaluate the function 3 times g at a point x, evaluate g at x and then multiply by 3. That is what is meant by 3 times g. But again, by definition, fx is fx of x. So it preserves addition, it preserves scalar multiplication, hence fx is linear. Of course, I should say this is true for every f, for every g, for every alpha, and so on and so forth. Whatever f and g we take, whatever alpha we take, this is going to work. So preserve superpositions and hence fx is linear. So one hurdle has been crossed. It is a functional, it is a linear functional. Now we have to worry whether it is bounded. Okay. So let's look at the boundedness. For that, I want to see how big the value can get. So let us look at fx of f. The values of the functional are this. I want to look at how big this can get. By definition, this is modulus of fx. For any f, this is the definition. Now, f is a linear functional. F is a bounded linear functional. Remember, just now what I erased, this is less than or equal to norm f star into norm x, because f belongs to n star this, and therefore what we have here is, this is true for every f in n star. Therefore, mod fx f by norm f star is less than or equal to norm x. Okay. Remember, if you want to get f star to be bounded, this ratio must be under control. Now that ratio is under control, therefore capital Fx is bounded and the norm of capital Fx will be less than or equal to norm of x. The supremum, everybody is less than or equal to norm x, so the supremum will also be less than or equal to norm x. So hence, I will keep this, hence Fx is bounded and the norm of Fx is less than or equal to norm of x. So let's summarize all that we have got. What you have got is, you start from any x in the norm linear space n. From that you can concoct a functional on n star, and that concocted functional is linear, and that concocted functional is bounded, and the norm of the concocted functional is smaller than or equal to the original norm that you started with. So summarize. Summarizing, we get the following. Corresponding to every x in n, there exists an Fx in n double star such that norm of fx is less than or equal to norm of x. This takes care of those three statements, that this is a functional, that is linear, and that is bounded. All these are summarized in one statement saying that fx belongs to n double star. And the control on the norm is this. The norm fx cannot be more than the original norm you started with. Okay. So this is the shadow of x created in n double star. Start from x, through these functionals you go, and that creates a shadow which is the point f of x. Every point in n has a shadow point called fx in n double star. So we can define now a map which I will call it as script n from n is starting from n going to its shadow. This is the shadow map defined as eta of x is equal to that f of x for every x in n. The f of x is what we constructed now. For every x, define the shadow. So this is the shadow map. And this shadow is obtained through going through that in between fellow n star. Okay. So now we have this is n double star, and we have x, and that's eta which take, or m which takes eta x which is fx. Okay, so every element is now converted to an element there through this process. Okay. So this is some kind of a complicated translation of a word in n to a word in n double star. The dictionary in between, we need a translator who is that n star. That fellow express, he gives rise to this dictionary, and that makes how to translate x to a fellow there. You translate him into fx. How do I get fx? You have to go through this in between fellow n star. Okay. Now there are many questions that arise. This is the moment you have a map from two non-linear spaces. Is it linear? Is it bounded? So is it a bounded linear transformation? And if so, is it by chance even keeping the lengths intact? The original length and the identified length are intact. So the questions that we now want to ask are, now does one will now seek, examine if one eta is linear, then see the shadow will preserve superpositions. The shadow identification will preserve superposition. So whatever arithmetic you want to do, you can also do there. So no problem. 2, eta is bounded, whether eta is bounded, in which case, see, this doesn't do too much damage. It works within certain elastic limit, and more importantly, whether it is non-preserving, and if so, is it non-preserving. So in other words, the shadow length and the original length are the same. The shadow length is measured in the shadow world, namely with this norm, and the shadow world has its own measurement techniques to get the length, and the original world has its own measurement techniques to measure the length. Somehow if that coincide, you see arithmetic only is not maintained, measurements, metrics are also maintained. Okay. And the important question is, can two fellows produce the same shadow? Like one x is there, I calculate its shadow, comes here as an fx, I have a y, I calculate its shadow which is fy. Is it any chance that if x is not equal to y, but still the shadows merge? If that is the case, then this coding has a confusion. Two fellows have the same code and that will create a lot of mess. So therefore we ask, is it 1 1? That is, different points produce different shadows. We want to know whether it is 1 1. So these are some of the first questions. Of course the last question is whether every point here is covered by the shadows. Is there a total eclipse? But that in general is too much to expect. Certain cases it happens, certain cases it may not happen. So let us ask that question also, is eta onto? Okay, if I said eta is 1 1, if eta is onto. Okay, so these are the questions that we will ask. So first of all, we will go, remember, okay, we will go step by step. Okay, the first question, the linearity. So all we have to do is make sure that eta of x plus y will be eta x plus eta y, and eta of alpha x is alpha of eta x. The same story for linearity. So xy belongs to n, right? What can I say about x plus y? That also belongs to n, because n is a vector space. So implies z equal to x plus y also belongs to this, and eta creates a shadow for every fellow, and therefore eta creates a shadow for z. Okay. So therefore eta z is defined, and what is eta z? By definition it is f of z. Okay. Eta z, by definition it is f of z. But how is f of z defined? F of z, where is f of z? It will be in here, because eta takes everybody from here to there. That is the shadow. So any shadow lives in n double star. The moment it is in n double star, it is going to act on n star element. So I have to look at fz of f. But how was this defined? Between f of ez. But now what is f of z? F of x plus y. Z was x plus y. But now what do I know about f? That is linear. So this is equal to f of x plus f of y, because f belongs to n star. N star elements are linear functionals on x. Okay. But f of x by definition is fx of f, and this is fy of f. Right? Is the computation clear? So what have we got? The action of fz on any f is the same as the action of fx on f plus the fy on f, which means This is true for all f. So if two functions coincide at all the points, that means the functions must be same. So this is true for every f in n star, and therefore fz is equal to fx plus fy. So what is fz? That is by definition eta z. So eta z, and fx by definition is eta x, and fy by definition is eta y, or eta of z is x plus y, eta of x plus y is eta x plus eta y. Okay. So eta preserves addition, the arithmetic is preserved. Similarly, b, so let alpha be any scalar and x in n, then alpha x also belongs to n. Let us call it as now w. W is alpha x. So eta w is defined because eta is defined for every element in n. Alpha w belongs to n, and therefore eta w is defined. And now what is eta w? It is f of f sub w. The shadow of w is denoted by script f sub w. And how is f script w defined? Again, as before, its action on any f is defined as f of w. Same story here. Addition was translated to the fact that f preserves addition. Similarly, scalar multiplication is now translated to the fact that f preserves scalar multiplication, f of alpha x, that is alpha of fx. Which is, so that says fw of f is equal to alpha fx. Fx of f, because fx is fx of f, which is alpha fx acting on f. So again, this action is the same as this action, and therefore fw, this is true for every f in n star, and therefore fw is alpha fx, which implies eta of w is alpha eta of x, because this is what is eta of w and this is what eta of x is, but w is alpha x, so eta of x is alpha. So therefore we have verified that eta preserves addition, eta preserves scalar multiplication, therefore eta is linear. So therefore eta is linear. The next is whether eta is bounded. Recall, we had said that the shadow has at most the length of the original identifications. We had fx was less than or equal to norm of x, but fx is what? Eta x. So the norm of eta x is less than or equal to norm x. So what does that say? Eta is bounded and its norm can be at most 1. So that says norm of eta x divided by norm of x, the changed length to the original length, is at most 1 for every x. And therefore the supremum will also be less than or equal to 1, which says the norm of eta will be less than or equal for every x not equal to theta, because we have denominator. Therefore norm of eta is less than, not only it is bounded, its norm is at most 1. So eta is bounded, and in fact norm is eta is less than 1. Now what we are asking in the third question is whether the equality holds. Remember we had said that is it norm preserving in the second question. Further, is it norm preserving? That means we want the norm of eta x must be the same as norm of x. We have said it cannot be more than norm x, but we want to know whether it is equal to norm x, and that's where Horn-Banach theorem comes into the picture. Okay, it is here that the need to prove a theorem like that was necessary. Okay, so let me write here. To decide if eta is norm preserving, we have to show that eta x norm is equal to the original norm. To decide if it's norm preserving, you have to show that this is equal to. Okay, but we already have less than or equal to. Okay, but we already have so we want to show this is also greater than or equal to. If we show this, we are done. Okay, if we show this, we are done. Suppose we show that norm of eta x is greater than or equal to for every x. Then we will have both the inequalities. Then therefore we will have norm of eta x will be equal to norm of x. Right. So how do we show that? Okay, so that is we have to show that. So we have to show that what is eta x? By definition, eta x is the shadow. The shadow is what we denote by script fx. We want to show that this is greater than or equal to norm x. But how was this defined? This is the supremum of modulus of fx of f divided by norm f star f belonging to n star f naught 0. We want to show that this is greater than or equal to norm x. Right? This is what we want to show. That is, we want to show that the least upper bound is greater than or equal to x. So look at this slightly in simple language. Think of least upper bound as some maximum. So we want to show some maximum is greater than or equal to some number. Suppose I say that the maximum score in this class is greater than or equal to 40. It's enough if I show one fellow has scored 40. Then obviously therefore maximum will be greater than or equal to 40. So therefore if I show that there is one fellow f for which this ratio is equal to norm x, I am finished. Okay, one fellow has scored that number. So therefore for this it is enough to show that there exists one f, remember it must be in n star, f not equal to theta star, because one of these fellows, these are the students, okay, such that norm modulus of fx by f divided by norm f star is greater than or equal to norm x. Now, can I write that is equal to, I will just put one fellow equal to that. Do you agree with this? Fx is linear, therefore constants can be pulled out, and from the modular this is a positive, so therefore it will come in the denominator. So the fact that fx can be linear, that constants can be pushed inside and outside as you like. So this 1 over this constant can be absorbed here. So what am I trying to do? I am trying to get a unit functional there, unit norm. So therefore there is fxu equal to norm x, where u belongs to n star. Norm of u is now what? Must be equal to 1. Obviously, therefore it is a non-zero functional. If its norm is going to 1, it's going to be so. Instead of looking now, so therefore what I want to do is, I want to get hold of one linear functional whose norm is 1, check that mod of fx u is equal to norm x. Is that correct? That's exactly what I am trying to do. And I will be even lucky if enough to show that there exists u belonging to n star, norm of u equal to 1, and f of xu is equal to norm x without even the modulus. Then obviously modulus will also be equal to that, because everything is non-negative. So all I have to do is, if somehow or the other I can concoct one linear functional on n whose norm is 1 and which takes the value norm x at the point x, because this fxu is what? That is u of x. This is how it is defined. Well, let me put a capital U, okay, because I denoted all these things by capital letters. So f of x, this star norm, and this is ux equal to norm, because fx of f is f of x. So fx of anything is that anything acting on x by definition, remember that. So u of x equal to norm x. So therefore that's the crux of the matter. Given any, obviously I don't have to worry about x equal to 0 case. Why? X is equal to 0 case, the shadow is going to be the 0. There is really no big problem. Okay. So the main problem is, if I have a non-zero vector x, can I concoct a linear functional u whose norm is 1, such that the linear functional, that doctor, when he measures that whatever that parameter he is measuring, he gets exactly that length of that fellow as the answer, height. Okay, he is essentially the height measuring doctor. Suppose there is a height measuring doctor and we are done. We want to show that such a doctor exists. That's essentially what Hahn-Banach theorem is. So what we will say is now a lemma, which is simple, essentially that's what Hahn-Banach theorem is, but we will put it in as a general format. So lemma, given any x not equal to theta in a non-linear space n, there exists a u in n star such that 1 norm of u is equal to 1 and 2 u of x measures precisely the length of x. Okay, that lemma, will come to that lemma. Suppose we have that lemma, then we are done. Okay. Therefore, by lemma, there exists such a u, and therefore eta x double star equal to norm x for every x. Therefore, that question of norm preserving, I think I erased all the questions. First question was, is it linear? Yes. Second question was, is it bounded? Yes. If it is bounded, is it norm preserving? Yes. Okay, so therefore, we have now progressed quite a bit. What we have shown so far is that modulo this lemma, if we had this lemma, then what we have shown is we have this n and we have this n double star and we have this map eta, and this eta is a linear which takes x to eta x is the shadow. This shadow map is a norm preserving linear transformation. Okay. So it preserves the arithmetic, it preserves the metric. All these are nicely preserved, so you can do all the calculations here or there you want with respect to these values. You can either work with the shadow. There is an interesting topic. I saw a couple of nice papers called shadow computing. Is anybody familiar with it? Here? Anybody from computer science? Not, I hear all kinds of words. Cloud computing, of course, now everybody knows what cloud computing is. There is something called shadow computing. Okay. So the shadow is some kind of a partial information. What is the information that you can generate from partial information? Roughly that's the idea. Okay. I show a couple of nice master's thesis at EPFL and also okay, there are a couple of good papers on this. Okay. Anyway, let's get out. So therefore now what are the next question that we raised? Whether this coding of an element here by its shadow, does it create any confusion? Will two fellows have the same shadow? So we asked the question whether it is 1 1. So the next question that we asked is eta 1 1. So we want to see, to show that for this, we want to show that if x and y are in n and x not equal to y, their corresponding shadows must be different. Eta x, the shadow of x must be different from the shadow of y. If you want it to be 1 1, then different fellows must have different shadows. Okay. This is what we want to show. So again we see that lemma comes into the picture. Suppose x is not equal to y, let us call z as x minus y. Okay. We are given two different fellows, so x minus y is what I am calling as z. Now that is also in n, because n is a vector space, so difference of two elements will still be there. So I take look at z equal to x minus y, z is not 0. Why is it not 0? Because x is not equal to y. Then by the lemma, the moment you give a non-zero fellow, there will be a linear functional u whose norm is 1 and u evaluates its length at this point. There is a doctor corresponding to him. So by lemma, there exists u in n star such that 1 norm of u equal to 1 and u evaluates the length of z at z. right? That's precisely what the lemma says. For every person, there is a doctor here, corresponding doctor. That doctor may vary from person to person. For every person here, there is a doctor to whom it goes, and what he writes in his paper after the measurement is precisely his length. Okay, so u of z is normal z. So we are guaranteed such a u. Okay, so therefore this lemma is going to prove many things for us, that it is norm preserving and that it is 1 1 also, right? So now we want to prove that eta x is not equal to eta y. Suppose eta x equal to eta y. Suppose two fellows had the same shadow, which means fx equal to f. The corresponding shadows are equal. If fx equal to fy, these are two functions acting on n star, they are same, therefore their values at every point must be same. Their values are always calculated as values at f's. For every f in n star. But what is the definition of fx of f? It is fx. Fx equal to fy for every f in n star. Now this is a very important thing. If okay, that now f is linear. So that says fx minus fy is 0 for every f, but f is linear, so it's fx minus y is 0 for every n star. That says f of z is 0 for every f, right? And therefore in particular for this u, because u is in n star, so therefore u of z equal to 0 because u belongs to n star. Contradiction. Why? Because u of z is not z and that's not 0, because that is non-zero, and therefore you get a contradiction. Is that right? So therefore eta is 1 1. It's very you see both the pivotal role that lemma plays. Okay. In fact, what is the crux of the matter by that lemma here? What it says is, if f of z is equal to 0 for all f, the only way that can happen is z is 0. So if all the doctors give he is dead, he is dead. His brain is dead, his heart is dead, his liver is dead, his pancreas is dead. Every doctor gives 0 marks. One fellow examines heart, 0. One fellow examines brain, he gives 0. If every doctor gives 0, the fellow is 0. Finished, he is dead. So that's the f of z can be 0 for all f, only if that is 0. Okay. Everybody filters the number 0 for him, and therefore that can happen only for the 0. That is again a consequence of this lemma, and that lemma itself is a consequence of slightly more general theorem called the Hahn-Banach theorem. Okay, so therefore what have we got? So hence, this picture is there. Let me draw that picture again. Hence, eta from n to n double star defined as eta of x is equal to f of x, with our previous notation, is a 1 1 norm preserving linear transformation. and therefore we have this picture. We have this n, we have this n double star, and we have this eta, and this x is mapped to fx under this map. Okay, and different fellows go to different things, and therefore if I now go on taking the image of all these fellows, the full shadow of n will be something like this. It may take the full space or partial. Okay, so therefore this will be something like this. The whole of eta n will be some big small piece there. The range of eta will be again a subspace, because eta is a linear transformation. The range is always a subspace. Okay, it will be a subspace of n double star. If it is onto, it will be the whole space, otherwise it will be a partial subspace. This eta, it's therefore basically what it says is this can be embedded here point by point, we can identify without any confusion, because each fellow has a different fellows are different shadows. Therefore every point has a perfect position or code there. So this is a coding of n elements as n double star elements. Okay. So this coding is called the natural embedding. This is called, this eta is called the natural embedding. All this is natural, okay, embedding of n into of n into n double star. Okay, this is the famous fundamental natural embedding. This embedding may or may not be onto. That is, whether the shadow covers the whole of n double star, we do not know. Okay. In fact, in general it may not be. For some it is true, for some it is not true. We will look at some examples later. So if it is also onto, note what is onto. The natural embedding must be onto. There may be some other embedding which may be onto, which may be non-preserving, which may be 1-1 and all that. I am not bothered. If the natural embedding is onto, then the space is called reflexive. Then the nonlinear space is called reflexive. The terminology. Now mark the following, note the following. Suppose it was onto, that means this is completely identified with this. Addition, scalar multiplication, norm, everything. Therefore convergence here will mean essentially the same as convergence here. But then this will be a dual, therefore it will be Banach. The dual of any nonlinear space is a Banach space. So this will be a Banach space, that will force this to be a Banach space. So you cannot talk about reflexivity at all if the original nonlinear space is not Banach. Okay. If it is Banach, there is a possibility that it is reflexive. Okay. So if, note, to even ask if is reflexive, we need a priori that n is a Banach space. So we can't talk about reflexive, non-Banach reflexive, non-linear space is Banach. So we will always talk about some Banach spaces being reflexive Banach spaces and some Banach being non-reflexive Banach spaces. There is no question of something which is not Banach being reflexive. Minimum requirement for reflexivity is that the nonlinear space be Banach. Okay. Now all this is modulo this lemma. So this lemma played two crucial roles. One, to show that this mapping is 1-1, and it also showed that it is non-preserving. Both for these two important facts, that the metric is preserved, and to show the fact that different fellows have different shadows, this lemma was the ground. So therefore this is a very, very important lemma. Now what does that say? Okay, that's our next topic, which is what Hahn-Banach theorem is, which I will take up next time. But now let me just give 1 minute of what this problem asks. See, here is the nonlinear space. There is one fellow x here who is not 0. Okay, I want a linear functional which goes from here to, let us take the simple case, first real numbers. Okay, simplest situation, let us take f to be r. So I want a linear functional from there to there, which is such that I want to define u of x to be norm x. Okay. If I wanted only linear functional, that's not a problem. We will see why. But if you want a bounded linear functional, that requires a lot of hard work. Okay. What is the answer? I all know, forget about boundedness and all, I have a vector space. If I have a vector space, I have full knowledge about a linear functional. The moment I know what the linear functional does on the basis vectors, right? A complete knowledge of the linear functional is at our hands if we know a complete knowledge of its action on a basis. So now what we want to do is, we will start with the vector x and we can complete it into a basis. Any linearly independent set can be extended to a basis. A single element x not equal to 0 is a linearly independent set. So it can be extended to a basis. So only I have to now tell what u does to this basis. I will say u does this to x and let it do whatever it wants to the other fellows. Then I would have got a linear functional which takes the value norm x at the point x. So this is not a big deal. But the problem is I want to norm 1. And that's where the real problem is. If I give the values arbitrarily in the other part of the basis, that may bloat the norm and it may not even be bounded. So therefore I must control the values there in such a way that it is bounded and has norm bound. So that is where the problem is. Now the way to look at the problem is, well, I know at this point x, at least knowing the value at the point x, can I now extract what should be the values at some more points? Yes? What should be the value of u at 2x? 2 times norm x. So I can now generate the what the value of u should be at any multiple of x, which means in the subspace generated by that vector x. So basically by revealing what the value of u should be at one point, I have revealed the value of u in a subspace. Now therefore, you look at this problem as I have given a bounded linear functional in a subspace with some bound, extend it to a bounded linear functional to the whole space with the same bound, and that's what Hahn-Banach theorem is. Okay, so the Hahn-Banach theorem tells us, given a bounded linear functional only on a small portion, namely a subspace, get a bigger linear functional which is defined everywhere and which still in the bigger space has the same norm, and that's the Hahn-Banach theorem says it can be done. Okay, and we will see how it is done. That's the next class. I will do this extension theorem. Okay, I will go over this again and state the Hahn-Banach theorem, and we will see the proof is natural. It's not at all difficult. Okay, if you understand what is going on, it's a very simple theorem. Okay, there is only one small thing eventually that you have to make sure happens, and it does happen. Okay, I think I will stop here.